Former New York Republican Congressman George Santos is out of prison. This after President Trump commuted his sentence on Friday. Santos had been serving a 7-year sentence for wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. In a lengthy Truth Social post, President Trump writing this, George Santos was somewhat of a rogue, but there are many rogues throughout our country that aren't forced to serve 7 years in prison. I started to think about George when the subject of Democrat Senator Richard Dunning Dick Blumenthal came up again. As everyone remembers, Dunning stated for almost 20 years that he was a proud Vietnam veteran, having endured the worst of the war, watching the wounded and dead as he raced up the hills and down the valleys, blood streaming from his face. He was a great hero, and he would leak to any and all who would listen. And then it happened. He was a complete and total fraud. He never went to Vietnam. He never saw Vietnam. He never experienced the battles there or elsewhere.
Yeah, that post goes on to say this: his war hero status and even minimal service in our military was totally and completely made up. This is far worse than what George Santos did, and at least Santos had the courage, conviction, and intelligence to always vote Republican. George has been in solitary confinement for long stretches of time and by all accounts has been horribly mistreated. Therefore, I just signed a commutation releasing George Santos from prison immediately. Good luck, George. Have a great life. With that, we'll bring in Randy Zellen and David Schwartz, both criminal defense attorneys. Thank you, gentlemen, for being on. We do appreciate that. And David, if I'd like to start with you, if I can. Obviously, the president has the powers to pardon or commute sentences. He decided to do so moving forward with former Congressman George Santos. Overall thoughts on that, and maybe the president's explanation of why he did it. Your thoughts on that?
I wasn't in love with the explanation, but certainly under the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2 gives the president a wide spectrum to pardon or to give a reprieve to whoever he wants. And that's the way the criminal justice system is set up. It's set up brilliantly. Hamilton spoke about it, that in the criminal justice system, we have excessive sentences. In the criminal justice system, we have unfair verdicts. And that is the ultimate check and balance over the criminal justice system. I would like to see it used even never heard of. Get a fair shake in the system.
House Speaker Mike Johnson was asked about it over the weekend. Here's how he explained why George Santos was let out. Watch.
10 former Republican members of Congress who the president has either pardoned or issued clemency for. 10.
Okay, you want to talk about what Joe Biden did with that power?
No,
he pardoned his own family. The only thing he signed, by the way, with his own pen, everything else is auto pen.
Yeah,
but categories of hardened criminals that they just released from prison. At least President Trump is fully transparent.
Randy, what do you think of that rebuttal?
It's legitimate. I think David's point is well taken. I would leave the partisan politics out of it if I were the president, and I would simply focus in on two critical things that the criminal justice system and federal sentencing looks to avoid. One, we want to avoid unwanted sentencing disparities. And for George Santos to get 7 years while Sean Combs got a little more than 4 years, I would say that that is an unwanted sentencing disparity. We also look for a sentence that is sufficient, but not greater than 7 years for a nonviolent, white-collar, more or less first-time offender. That's kind of an excessive sentence. So I think President Trump got it right by saying 7 years, that's a bit much. Just let this guy go home.
Yeah, and he focused, too, on how he was treated in prison. According to the president, he was in solitary confinement. Mr. Santos appeared on CNN State of the Union following his release. He spoke about how he found out about the commutation in that moment. Here's that.
I had no expectations. I wasn't even aware until I learned it off of the chyron of mainstream media inside of the prison myself. I had just been released from segregated isolation after 41 days for absolute no valid reason.
So that is wild. I mean, just imagining you're in his position and seeing your name flash on the screen, learning that your sentence has been commuted. That must have been the moment. Santos now going on to say that he's done with politics for now. Instead, he's focusing on making prisons more humane. And David, that's interesting in itself because he has a firsthand look at how you're treated within the prison walls, within confinement, and he's got a new, what appears to be lease on life.
Sure. Hopefully he adds something to society. And that moment, it is an incredible moment. I had the fortune of having a client that received a presidential pardon. And it's just an incredible moment to think that you're going to be serving this long jail sentence and your sentence is commuted. And keep in mind, this is just a commutation. It's not a complete pardon. So he still has a criminal conviction. It's just that the sentence was commuted.
Yeah. Santos also speaking about whether or not he received special treatment because of his voting record. Here's what he had to say about that.
You know what? I say this, and I hate that we have to go down this road. And then there's a lot of people who were upset with President Biden who pardoned his entire family before he left office in an unprecedented move. So pardon me if I'm not paying too much attention to the curl clutching of the outrage of my critics and of the people predominantly on the left who are going to go out there and try to make a big deal out of something like this.
So kind of to Speaker Johnson's point, Randy, as we hear there, right? You know, President Trump obviously has the ability to do so. It is interesting that, of course, you know, George Santos did vote down the line with Republicans, but he was a Republican congressman. He was, you know, in theory, representing voters in his district who wanted him to serve. Your thoughts?
Right place at the right time. And again, if we're going to be transparent, if it were your son, if it were your husband, if it were your brother, you sure as hell would want him to be able to take advantage of every opportunity to be able to get that commutation or that pardon. So it's simply a matter of what side of the aisle you're on. If you're in the right place, then you're happy with it. And if you're not one of the lucky ones, then you're unhappy with it. But that should not be the litmus test.
Yeah, but interesting point Santos brought up about the preemptive pardon signed by President Biden in his final hours in office. Randy Zellen joining us. David Schwartz, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.